In this lesson, we'll start the compositing process for our render. Let's begin. Our worlds have been fully detailed. However, they are still very smooth and still resemble a 3D render in some places. There's nothing wrong with this, and the render still looks pretty good. But we're after a very specific look that we haven't quite arrived at yet. Our goal is to make our render look as if it's a scan from a paper manga book. We want to have visible imperfections that a printed page from a book would create, such as print lines, paper fibers, and patchy darkness from the ink. We'll be adding all of these effects and more in the compositing workspace. So let's head there now. You can find the compositing workspace up here, directly next to the rendering. So we're going to choose compositing. I've already customized the layout of this workspace for us to make our lives a little bit easier. On the left side, we have an editor, and on the right side, we have a window for our rendered image. Before we begin working in the editor, let's render our image so we can see it on the right side. So we just go over here to render, and then render image. You should now see your completed render here in the right viewport. If for some reason you're unable to see your render over here on the right side, we can go over here to the left window, and we're going to click on this backdrop button, and then we're going to turn it off again. After doing that, hopefully everything here updates and you should be able to see your render. So what is compositing? Compositing is the process of adding additional effects on top of our rendered image. This can include simple things like adjusting the contrast or the saturation of an image, but it can also include slightly more complex things like overlaying texture images, such as paper fibers or lines on top of the image to change its look. It can also be algorithmic effects like adding lens flares, distortion, or painterly effects on the image. There are a ton of different things that you can do with compositing. If you're familiar with post-processing images in applications like Photoshop, you'll likely understand the theory behind a lot of what we do here, even if you're not familiar with the process within Blender. We'll be adding all of these effects to our image over here on the left side. This editor might look really similar to the shading workspace that we created our material with, and that's because it is. The method of using this editor is basically identical to the shader editor, so it should feel really familiar as we work. This left node over here is our rendered image, and these right two nodes are just outputs, so we can see exactly what we're working on over here on the right. All of the effects that we'll be adding will exist in the middle between these two groupings of nodes. Let's start out by adding a really simple effect that's going to soften our line work slightly. To add this new node, we're going to hit Shift and A, go to Search, and we're going to look for a Dilate/Erode node. So D-I-L-A, we're going to choose Dilate/Erode. And then we can just place this brand new node directly on top of this line here when it turns white. This node hasn't done much to our image yet, and that's because we need to adjust the settings to fit our render. Let's zoom into this new node now. Our goal with this Dilate/Erode node is to soften the line work in our image. We want to make it look like the ink from our line work has bled into the paper a little bit and soften the edges. This might seem unintuitive, but a large part of our compositing efforts here will be actually making the image more imperfect, meaning that we want to break up the hard edges and perfect gradients present in the image right now to give it a more hand-drawn and less computer-generated look. This is the key to the manga effect that we're after. Before we make any adjustments to this node, let's find a spot on our image that's a good place to look for the effect. So again, let's zoom in down here to the bottom right on this pipe area with the ladder. Now we can begin adjusting these settings. So our first step here is going to be switching it from mode steps to feather instead. And then we're going to change the distance from 0. We're going to set it instead to 2 just by clicking this arrow here to the right twice. And we'll see after making these adjustments that these lines here have a slight blur to them. If we lowered this distance number, we'll see that this blur is a lot less. However, we're actually looking for this amount of blur, so we want to set it to 2. Let's discuss these settings quickly. So first, there are a few different modes that we could choose. However, we use the feather mode as it creates nice soft edges for the line work. The distance value simply changes the strength of this softening effect. Higher numbers mean softer images. We still want to have distinct lines, just a bit softer, so a value of 2 works nicely for this purpose. We can now see over here in this right viewport how this node has softened our image slightly. This has the effect of not only giving the lines a slight bleed, but it also helps make our hand-drawn details blend in better with the freestyle line work that we have along the edges. By running the entire image through this Dilate/Erode effect, we've made everything just a bit more harmonious and blended together. It's a lot harder now to tell what parts are from the material, what parts we hand drew, and what parts are from the freestyle line work. Okay, so that effect was pretty easy. Let's add something a little bit more complicated now. We're going to be overlaying 3 different images over our render to make it feel more papery and aged. Let's start with the first of these images now. On the left side over here, we're going to zoom out so we can see more of the nodes. And then we're going to be adding 5 brand new nodes for this effect. And we're going to be adding them from left to right. So the first one that we add, we're going to place over here, and then every new one we add, we'll just start placing further right. So let's hit Shift and A, go to Search, and then type in Image, I-M-A, and then choose Image, place that here to the left, Shift and A, Search, type in Color. We're going to choose Color Ramp, found here on the third option, place that next to it, Shift and A, Search. This time we're looking for Translate, so T-R-A-N, and then we can see Translate here as the second option. Next we want Transform, so Shift and A, Search, Transform, T-R-A-N. We're going to choose the first option here, Transform, and then lastly, Shift and A, Search, type in Mix, M-I-X, and we're going to choose Mix Color and place that here. Now let's get these nodes put into place and then connected. So first we can zoom out a little bit. We're going to drag select over all of these nodes here, move them a bit further to the left. Right around here should be fine. Now let's start connecting them together. So we're going to drag this mix node up here and place it on top of this line so it automatically connects. Then we can drag from image here on transform to the bottom socket here on the mix node. And then we're just going to be connecting from image to image on all of these. So image from translate to transform, from color ramp down to the translate, and then lastly from image to the factor down here at the bottom. Okay, so we have everything connected now. The render on the right side is turned black because we didn't add the correct texture image just yet. So first let's go over here to the image node here on the far left. We're going to click on this little white button here that looks like a folder. If we make this a little bit bigger, we can see here that it says open. So let's click on this open button. Now navigate to the textures folder that we downloaded at the very beginning of this class. Next, you're going to choose the paper_fibers image, and then go down here and click open image. Our next change will be to the mix color node. So we're going to zoom out here and then go over here to the right side, and we're going to adjust this mix color. So first we're going to switch it from mix to multiply, and then we're going to leave this factor set to 1. As a quick reminder, the multiply mode that we switched to overlays just the black parts of the image on the render below it. And now on the right side here, we can see that this paper image that we had before is now placed on top of our image. So we can see all these paper fibers laid directly on top of our render. And with just that single step, it's already looking a lot more like a manga page. We do have some other changes to make though, so let's start those now. So over here on the left, we're going to zoom out, go down to the bottom and go to the color ramp. And now with the black slider selected, also set to 0 down here, we're going to change its position to 0.175, hit enter. And now let's select the right slider by either clicking the small triangle here or just setting this slider to 1. And then we're going to change the position for this to 0.45 and then hit enter. The adjustments that we just made to this gradient knock out a lot of the gray values from the paper fibers, while still leaving behind the most prominent fibers on the image. So we can still see that texture applied here. Now it's time to shrink down this texture image so that the paper fibers aren't quite so huge. We're going to be doing this with the translate and transform nodes found here. Our first step is going to be using the translate node to make this image tile in all directions. That way it doesn't stop when it meets the edges of the frame. And then we're going to use the transform to shrink these paper fibers down. That way they're a better size for this image, because right now they're a little bit big. So let's start that first change now. We're going to go over here to the translate node, the one on the left. We're going to switch from repeat none to both axes instead. We're not going to notice any changes to our image just yet, and that's because we haven't shrunk it down. However, in reality, this paper fiber image that's being applied on top of our image now repeats in all directions, both up, left and right, and down. Now let's move over to the transform node directly to the right. And all we're going to do here is change this scale. So for the scale value, we're just going to type in 0.3 and then hit enter. This will shrink this paper fiber image down to just 30% of its original size. Now if we zoom in on our image, this paper fiber is much tinier and it's a better size for our image. This provides the image with a somewhat subtle, static-y appearance across the image that has just enough variety to make it look like fibers and not just digital noise. Just as a quick example to see what this translate node is doing, if we go back over here and switch it from both axes to none instead, we can now see that this paper fiber image only sits directly in the center of the image because we haven't told it to tile in all different directions and repeat. So if we switched it in this case, say to just Y, it would only repeat up and down, or if we did X, it would only go left and right. But for us, we wanted to have it set to both axes. That way it covers the entire image. Let's add one more image overlay before we end this lesson. This new overlay will largely be the same as the one we just added. However, it'll feature a few more nodes, so let's add those now. So first let's zoom out so we can see the whole system here. Then we're going to drag select over these right 3 nodes, so including this Dilate one, we're going to move those over to the right. And now down here along the bottom, we're going to add brand new nodes, again from left to right. So let's add those now. Shift and A, search, image, IMA, choose image, place that down here to the left. Shift and A, color ramp, place that down here. Shift and A, search. This is one of the new ones, so we'll type in rotate, R-O-T, and then we can choose rotate. Place that next to the color ramp. Shift and A, search, mix, color, place that here. Shift and A, search, translate, place that here. Shift and A, search, transform. We'll choose transform this time. Place that to the right. And then one last node, Shift and A, search, mix. We're going to choose mix color and place that here to the right. With our new nodes added, let's get them in position and then we can connect them together. So first, we're just going to select all these nodes on the bottom here and move them to the left. And then we can take this mix node and we're going to start by just dragging this up here on top of this line so it automatically connects it. Now let's zoom in down here to the bottom. And again, we can reposition these nodes just to get them a little bit tighter here. And then we can connect them here from left to right. So let's zoom in. We're going to connect from image to factor. And then this one here is a little bit tricky. So first let's move these down. So we're going to select the image and the color ramp, drag select over those, move them down slightly. And now we're going to connect from the image socket on this color ramp up here to rotate. Then we'll connect from the image socket on the rotate to the top socket here for the image. And then again, we're going to go down here to the color ramp and we're going to go from this image socket to the bottom image socket on this mix node. So we're actually having 2 versions of this color ramp going to this mix node, one of which is being affected by this rotate. I'll explain this here in just a minute. For now, let's keep moving right. We're going to connect from the image socket here to the image on the translate, and then again from image on translate to the image on transform. I can spread these out a little bit to make some room. And then the very last step is to attach from the image socket on transform to the bottom socket here for image on this last mix node. Just like last time, this is going to turn black because we haven't attached this image yet. So let's get our image attached now. So we can go over here to this image node. We're going to click on this right button with the white folder on it, click open, then navigate back to the textures folder that we had the other textures in. And we're going to choose paper_lines for this one. We'll select this image and then hit open image. And now just like last time, we can now see this entire image shown here in the render window on the right side. The image that we're using for this overlay almost looks a little bit like cardboard, but the main thing that we're concerned with is that 1, it's paper, and 2, it has these horizontal lines going across it. These are going to mimic something like a textured paper, or maybe even print lines from the printer. Now let's start adjusting these nodes. So first we're going to zoom out, we're going to go all the way over here to the right, and we're going to adjust this mix node. Let's zoom in on here. Just like last time, we're going to switch it from mix to multiply instead, and then we're going to leave the factor set to 1. Now we're able to see our render behind this image. Now let's zoom out, go down here to the bottom again, and we're going to adjust this color ramp. So with the black slider still selected, and it's set to 0 here so we know it's selecting the black, we can go to the position, and we're going to set this to 0.1, hit enter. Now we can select the right slider, the one on the right, and we're going to set this position to 0.3 and then hit enter. Just like the last time we adjusted a color ramp, we've removed a lot of the gray from the image and left behind just the major details, in this case these horizontal lines. Now let's zoom out, and then just for a moment we're going to skip this rotate node and go instead to this mix node. We need to adjust this mix node so that we can actually see what the rotate is doing. So first we're going to select this mix mode and switch it to multiply, and then again we'll just leave it set to factor 1. Now we're ready to adjust this rotate here on the left. So we'll notice before we make any changes here that these lines currently only go horizontal. We don't see any vertical lines really, at least not from the paper texture. However, if we go over here and switch this degree to 90 instead, we'll now see that we have vertical and horizontal lines. So we're getting a crisscross pattern here, almost like a waffle. By setting the rotation on this rotate node, we've rotated the second version of this image so that they cross over each other. This is the reason that we branched this. So we have one version of the regular image that's going directly into this mix node, and then we have that exact same image rotated by 90 degrees overlaying on top of the other one, which is what's giving us this crisscross pattern. Just like with the last image, we can go over here And now we need to adjust the repeat. So right now it's set to none. We're going to set it to both axes. And then for the scale, we'll go down here and we're going to type in 0.21 and then hit enter. We want this pattern a little bit tinier than the paper fiber. This smaller scale retains that same crisscross grid pattern that we saw before, but makes it a lot more subtle because it's so much smaller. I particularly like how much detail it adds to these large open areas of the wall that used to just be primarily white. This really gives this area here almost a concrete feeling now. And at this point, we're done with the first 2 image overlays, as well as this lesson. Hopefully by now, you're starting to appreciate how just a few simple overlays can really transform the image into something special. In the next lesson, we'll finish the compositing process for our render. I'll see you there.